The Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday raised its key interest rates to a record high in a decisive move to curb persistent inflation and strengthen the naira. For more on this latest hike in Nigeria's interest rate, how effective it can be in battling inflation, naira volatility in the forex market, how to stem the tide, and the state of Nigeria's economy, all of this to be discussed now with Professor Uche Uwaleke, the director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University, KEFI. Good afternoon. Welcome to Newsday. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon.
So with the third rate hike of the year, we have to ask, is there confidence in the market?
Well, I would say, of course, you can see the market was jolted, even though it was expected in the sense that anybody who followed the, what happened at the spring meetings, during the spring meetings, and also the staff report by the IMF under their Article 4 consultation, where they further urged the central bank to, tighten monetary policy. So anybody who has been following that, wouldn't be surprised that we also witnessed another, hike in the MPR. But I would say that, we have to be careful about adopting textbook approaches, to solving, our problems in this country. Just as I mentioned, it's already beginning to take its toll on the economy, on productive activity. Of course, you know that this kind of hike, has the potential of stifling productivity. Already, the manufacturers are complaining. They are, talking about huge, stock of unsold inventory, and with the repercussions that that has. Capacity utilization today is dropping partly on account of that. So you find productive activity, tanking. So that's not the kind of thing we want at this point, in this economy, which is why I advised earlier on that it's important we don't hand over the running of the economy, to external bodies. By external bodies, I mean our people that are supposed to be our friends, the development partners, Bretton Woods institutions. So whatever advice they are giving us, is important we know the ones that we can use, given our local, our peculiar, circumstance. So I don't think it was, in my view, I don't think the MPC ought to have done that, given the fact again that just a couple of weeks ago, we saw a 600 basis point increase just within 1 month between February and March. Despite that, we also saw an uptick in, headline inflation year on year, from 32.2% at the time to 33.69%, despite the hike. Okay, never mind the, marginal drop in month-on-month inflation. So what all of that goes to show or goes to say is that the MPR as a tool of monetary policy, would appear to have reached its, thither's end, and to that extent, the central bank, should not over-rely on the MPR, in its fight, against inflation.
No, very well said, Professor. In fact, some analysts, have likened the CBN to a farmer with only one tool, which is the interest rate hike. So I'm wondering, what other options are available to the CBN to employ in tackling inflation?
Yes, there's no doubt that the CBN should be concerned about rising inflation. That's its primary mandate, to maintain monetary and, price stability. But again, in doing so, it should recognize that there are factors that are driving inflation in Nigeria that are outside, its control. You can only deal with what you can control. What you can control, you try to see how you can do it, in conjunction with the authority that is responsible for that. Okay, so if you look at our inflation situation in Nigeria today. Yes, there is the monetary side, no doubt. The people will tell you the huge ways and means that entered the system must have helped to stoke inflation. There's no doubt about that. That is the bit the central bank should be concerned about. And in recent time, of course, they've been doing it. They've been using other tools. The open market operation, for example, central bank has been using OMO, to also mop up liquidity from the system. But when you rely on the policy rate, remember the policy rate is more like an anchor, and it's not just the formal sector that is using it as a benchmark. Even the informal sector, any borrowing that is done at this time is also having an eye on this MPR, because whether you're borrowing from cooperative or even doing peer-to-peer, the person will be pointing to the high interest rates before giving out the loan. So you can see how it permeates through the economy, and that's why I will advise caution on the overuse of the MPR. And if you also look at history, the highest we have seen in this country was in 1993. In 1993, inflation rate was highest at about 62%. And even at that time, even when it started declining, it wasn't the increase in rates that brought the thing down. Because in 1993, MPR was just around 26%. And that's why this one is more like, we are more like having an overkill in the rate hike. I want to also cite an example, because the impression being given is that the problem is that we have so much money, out there, and the way to tackle inflation is to, reduce the money supply. Money supply is only an intermediate target of monetary policy. The final target is inflation. So if you're looking at the final target, the question to ask is, what are the factors driving this inflation, the final target? Fortunately, the MBS is there, always giving us figures. And unfortunately, we are not using the data from the MBS. According to the data from the MBS, if you look at their last report, under their 12 divisional classifications, the first four, the first one is food. Out of the 3.69% inflation rate, food accounted for 17.5%. Then you have housing, electricity and gas, 5.6%. Then you have clothing, around 2.5%, and then transport, 2.2%. So you can see where the major pressure is coming. And if you look at all this, okay, you cannot really say that that is where they are as a result of money supply. Yes, even when you talk about exchange rate pass-through, we don't see much of exchange rate pass-through with respect to food. Okay, so the issues that border on food, okay, come more from the supply side, and that's why it is more of the fiscal side that should be tackling it. And even the monetary policy communique recognized that when it talked about insecurity, okay, in major food belt regions of the country. It talked about transport challenges, okay, the issue of also rising energy costs. These are factors, cost push factors that are actually driving inflation in Nigeria majorly. Okay, of course, the exchange rate pass-through is there, which is, of course, what the central bank should be concerned about. Now, and I also want to admit that the central bank has been doing one or two things to, again, ensure stability in the forex market, which should be its focus, and not to think that it can just, by consecutively raising monetary policy rates, bring down inflation. I was going to cite an example with Turkey, for example. We should be learning lessons from these countries. Now, Turkey has been raising its policy rate since June last year, 2023. Again, thinking that it will use that to wrestle inflation, but that hasn't happened. In June 2023 last year, if you check the monetary policy rates, the policy rate in Turkey, was just 8.5%. At the time, inflation rate in Turkey was 38%. Today, what is the situation? Turkey raised its policy rate by over 4,000 basis points between June last year and now. The last time the Central Bank of Republic of Turkey met, they raised policy rate to 50%, from 8.5% in June to 50% in March. But what has happened? Inflation has remained elevated to as high as 69-70% in Turkey. So that hasn't helped the situation. And it's also the same thing we're having now. The sad aspect of it is that even in Turkey, despite that, the economy is expanding. The economy of Turkey expanded in the last quarter of 2023. GDP growth rate in Turkey, quarter 4, was around 4.5%. Okay, but whereas in Nigeria, GDP growth rate, has not been as firm as, it's been elsewhere. Last year, for example, our real GDP came in at just 2.7% in 2023. What am I saying? I'm saying that the real challenge we are facing in this country is not just inflation, but stagflation. Stagflation is a situation in which you have not just prices rising, okay, you also have a slowdown in economic activity. So that's a problem. So in the case of Turkey, is inflation. The economy is expanding, okay? So they can even afford to say, let them, raise rates. But in our own case, we can't afford to do that because the more we raise rates, the more we are also hurting output, the more we are also creating that problem. And when you hurt output, what happens? You have unemployment, you have poverty, and I'm sure that's not the kind of thing this administration is working to improve living standards. It's also working to improve productivity. And it should be a collective thing between the central bank and the fiscal authority. So I want to see them sitting down and discussing these challenges together. It's not about, yes, I understand the two heads, if you like, the CBN governor and the Minister for Finance, they are friends. They can phone each other and talk. But I also expect to see an institutional framework that will bring them together, a coordinating committee where they can agree on targets, for this economy, commonly. Why am I saying that? If you look at the target being projected by the fiscal side, take for example, with respect to GDP, we are projecting 3.76% for 2024. What is the CBN projecting for 2024? The same metric, the same GDP. The CBN is projecting 3.38%. So you can see the variation. And meanwhile, it's the same economy. So the two must work together to achieve a common goal. That is what is missing. That is what I've not seen happening so far. But I know that with what has been put in place, so far, particularly the work of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, that is, working to streamline taxes and so on, to also encourage businesses to grow. This one would appear to also work against it because when interest rates are high and when businesses can access credit, for example, they won't be able to make profit. And if they are not unable to make profit, where will the government revenue come from? Because taxes will also drop. So these are some of the things we should be considering. And that's why I said it's important for the fiscal side and the monetary side to talk to each other. Let me make this point before, finally, on this question you asked me. And that is to also de-emphasize this pressure on money supply. We talk about money supply, too much money out there. But again, you come to think of it. Yes, there's much money. In the hands of who? In the hands of who? If you look at the national, the NDIC recent, recalibration of deposit insurance. NDIC raised deposit insurance from 500,000, the coverage, to 5 million. And when they raised it to 5 million, what did they say? They said that 5 million covers up to 98.9%. In other words, 99% of depositors. What does that tell you? That is only 1% of depositors that have above 5 million naira in the banks. Okay, even when they had it at 500,000, they said it covered 89%, meaning that only 10% of depositors have more than 500,000 naira in the bank. So when you look at that kind of structure, okay, when people talk about the money supply, broad money, namely currency in circulation, savings deposits, their demand deposits, and so on, including foreign deposits, the bulk of it is in the hands of a few. So we can be using that again, to basing our decisions on that kind of number. So essentially, what I'm saying is it's important for the fiscal side to sit down with the monetary side, and agree on how to really tackle the challenges that we have in this economy.
Fair enough, Professor. Yemi Cardozo, the CBN governor, has said that tackling inflation, we'd have to be patient, that there is no magic wand. What's your advice to average Nigerians?
Well, my advice to the average Nigerian is to devise measures, to beat inflation, personal, financial management. That this is the time, it's called for. But I also think the CBN governor, as I said, is doing well in a number of areas, particularly in the area of trying to manage the exchange rate. But I also think the kind of statement you should be making should be the one that gives hope. So when you say, for example, the inflation is going to take time to tackle, okay, it doesn't inspire hope. I recall some time ago when the president was addressing a group of people that came to see him at the villa, he was saying something like, yes, I recognize that inflation is rising, but that we would bring it down. He made that kind of comment, we would bring it down. So for me, that is more reassuring. Okay, so the statements that we should be making should be such that give people hope, give inspire people, to hold on. Okay, so I think for the average man on the streets, I think I also want to see light at the end of the tunnel. A number of things that are being put in place now, I think, would crystallize and into things that will finally bring inflation down. And I've also argued that even when inflation rates will moderate considerably, if inflation rate moderates considerably in the next couple of months, it's not going to be because MPR rate was raised. It is going to be more from what we are seeing from the fiscal side. For example, the rollout of the CNG buses, I expect that to have positive impact on transport, and also expect that to have moderating effect on inflation. The issue of the refineries, once the Port Harcourt Dangote refineries, for example, if they come on board and we import less fuel, conserve forex, stabilize exchange rate, again, that will also have positive impact on inflation, particularly when maybe energy costs also begin to come down. So investments here and there we're also doing in the power sector. Okay, once energy costs come down, you have again transport costs coming down, and government efforts to at tackling insecurity. These are the things that will bring inflation down, not by aggressively raising the monetary policy rate. As I said, the CBN governor can continue to focus on these measures he's already taken to deal with the issue of forex. The idea of, for example, asking BDCs, to reapply for license is a good one. Is trying to sanitize that space. I've always said it's not about supply. Yes, it's about supply, but it's not all about supply of forex. It's not all about liquidity, because it's also about demand. Because the more you supply liquidity into the forex market without tackling demand, the speculation, the abuses there, it's more like pouring water in a basket. Anything you bring will also be frittered away. So the best way to deal with the forex issue is to handle it both sides, both the supply side and the demand side. On the supply side, the government is already making effort. We have borrowed some money here and there. We've also try to attract, some foreign portfolio, investments, partly due to this rates that the CBN, has been doing. But again, that's not a sustainable way to really, attract investments. The investments we need in this country today are foreign direct investments as opposed to foreign portfolio investments. So with the supply that we have, again, we've seen some improvements again in crude oil output as a result of a reduction in crude oil theft. Okay, so that has also translated in some accretion to our external reserves. So all that is good, but again, we need to deal with the demand side. And part of what we need to do to deal with the demand side, I've always said, is to also see how we can come up with a Buy Nigerian law, to also see how we can engage in, enter into currency swap arrangements with countries like China, where we do most of our imports. So until we tackle the demand side, okay, including the issue of speculation, which again I give it to the central bank, the war on Binance, the war on crypto, to also sanitize that space. So by the time we deal with all of that, okay, that's the time you can now say you can have some reasonable stability, okay, in the forex market, while we are working on the long-run solution. What's that long-run solution? Productivity. We need to produce to be able to have things to exchange with the rest of the world, for us to earn, forex. And again, attracting foreign direct investments by cutting countries that are known to play big in foreign direct investments. Countries like Netherlands, I was happy when the president went to Netherlands. That's one country that is big in the FDIs. Singapore, Japan, China. These are the countries we should be cutting now with respect to FDIs, because if you look at Malaysia, if you look at Indonesia, these countries that usually report heavy FDIs, where do they come from? They come from Netherlands, they come from Singapore, they come from Japan. Okay, they don't come from the US or UK. These US and UK have been our long-standing partners, but what do they always bring to us? They bring foreign portfolio investments. Yes, we need foreign portfolio investments, but we need more of foreign direct investment. So I think, as I said earlier on, I see light at the end of the tunnel, but that can only come when there is proper handshake between the fiscal and the monetary side.
Professor Uche Uwaleke, Director, Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University, Kefi, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.